So I'm sitting here with Caleb, who made Marshall in Detroit, or Detroit and Marshall?
Marshall from Detroit.
Marshall from Detroit, and we could play around with the title if we wanted to. So we're at Sundance with the New Frontier VR Lounge, and your piece, 17-minute piece that I just watched, that engages with an artist, but engages with a landscape, a city on a very meta level. First of all, I want you to discuss the project here, you coming to Sundance, and what that entails, what that means for you, and then perhaps give me the gist of how everything came together in terms of landing this project, working on this project.
Well, I guess to answer your first question about coming here, yeah, I've never been here before. For me, it seemed important not to come here until I had something to show. So I've waited, and it's been great. And it's also as a person who has been working in film mainly for 8 years. So I've been doing VR for a little while, for a few years. But in terms of actually releasing stuff and going and debuting it, it's cool to come here for the first time into the New Frontiers program, because I feel like it actually is a very wonderful little family of beautifully smart people and just wonderful weirdos that I adore. So this has been sort of I can't imagine it going any better. I get the vibe around Sundance in general. That's not like there's not a lot of sort of like headbutting and competitiveness in this kind of ego games, but it's definitely nowhere to be found in this department. And I think that there's part of that everyone's piece is fairly different than each other's, more so than film is, because we're kind of you're in a fairly rigid medium. So this is like you're always kind of like we want to do someone else's stuff, and that's just you don't really know what to expect, and a lot of notes to be shared, and people that are pushing boundaries in all these corners. Anyway, it's sort of like mapping the imagination by walking around here. So the piece came to be. I was working with Felix and Paul on another project of VR series I'd been developing for about a year and a half, writing in Brazil and doing a bunch of historical research. And I'd gone around to a number of companies and showed them this piece, and a lot of people responded to it but didn't really know what to do with the project because it was very ambitious. And it was sort of approaching VR from a place that I hadn't seen before and where I wanted to go after, which is really stretching spatial literalism, which a lot of VR sticks to spatial literalism, and using the conventions of drama and background in theater, of scene building and these things that kind of keep you emotionally present. So basically, instead of a lot of people focusing on spatial presence, focus on emotional presence, and then let that be the anchor, and then the space can deviate from what it should do. And this is sort of the theory. So when I met the guys and we started talking about this, we immediately hit it off and had a lot of great conversations and talks about stuff, and that started going and for a while, and then this project came up. And I'm from Michigan, so they said, hey, do you want to take the lead on this piece? And we were looking for something because their work is all proprietary. They built all of their amazing equipment and their entire workflow from the ground up totally. So you can't. They are the experts. Like if you want to learn how to do it, you learn with them. So they're very gracious in inviting me in, as an outside director, which I they hadn't done before. Worked with someone in that sort of level, and so it's kind of like going to a sort of film school in a way, with great mentors who are very supportive, and then coming on board and beginning to take some of these ideas that had long been exciting me about how space can speak to us a little bit differently, and what VR can do different than theater or other spatial art forms. And then also being from that area, I have a tremendous heart, and not just heart, but Detroit means a lot to me in the sense I feel like it's the most mythic city in all the Western world in our modern age. And if there are 20 Chicagos that you can experience, there have to be far more Detroits. It's a city that if you go there, it's the only place I've been to in the West where there is such a palpable emotion in the air that is so packed with feelings that are kind of difficult to take apart. And when I first went there, I thought it was despair when I was younger. But when I got older, I realized it was much more nuanced than that, and there was a tremendous amount of beauty and hope and resilience in it. And I think that that's sort of what I wanted to show from with this piece, which is that I felt like you have a city here that is basically, it has no defenses, spiritually, like its defenses are down. It's just it's so laid raw, and I feel like a lot of things look at that on a very one-dimensional surface level, and it's we get caught up in the ruin porn, and caught up in the post-apocalyptic narratives and so forth, and it's
very dismissive. It's very facile. It's very easy to label it as one thing when it's
and also forget about its role in the historical context, and that it's really the Detroit experiment, because it's what happens when the capitalistic dreams of industry fail on a massive level. It's the largest civic bankruptcy in Western history. It's $2 billion. I mean, what happened in that city during that period is directly related to like the Flint water crisis. I mean, it's all bound up. That all said, for me with this piece, I felt like when you deal with an artist like Eminem, who's such an icon, one of the great icons of all time, and also such a wonderful experience on a wonderful guest on camera, who's very gracious with his energy and just so down to earth. It's really easy for that to overshadow basically anything else going on. So I feel like my role, I felt, was making sure that Detroit was speaking just as loudly and just as clearly as he was, and that there was an equality represented there. When you have someone of his stature and his magnitude, it's just like everyone sees that piece because he's in it, and it's really easy to just kind of like use that as a crutch, and not have to go deeper. And I feel like out of respect for his love for the city and the way that it's affected him, I feel like it was our job to give the city its due.
Yeah, it's leverage for Detroit.
Yeah, and we had our first screening here when we first played it. There was a woman in the front row who went to Q&A, and she asked a question. She said, "Hey, I've been in LA for 5 years, but I'm from Detroit," and she said, "I just wanted to say thank you because I've never seen my city shown that way, and it's how I feel about it." And she started crying in the middle of the Q&A. And I was like, oh my God, for someone to cry about, just showing shots of a city, I mean, there's no like, it's not some big dramatic documentary about, socio-economic conflicts or anything like that, just poetry. I thought that was very, that was, not that you want people crying, but, that we'd succeeded. And we were hoping to show a side of Detroit that not only have you not experienced, but you feel is there, and yet you can't find. It's a little bit beyond the veil, and it's I always think of it as the city dreaming of itself, that you're allowed to participate in.
You're way into telling the story that's being told in the limo, but also the story that you want to tell. It's two different things, but they're parallel, they're intertwined.
I think what was tricky about the shooting schedule and the limits that we had around it is that we had to. It's a production to shoot this sort of stuff. So that my first contribution to the project when I came on board was saying, hey guys, I think we should stage this all in one night, or for the experience to feel like it's all in one night, and it should all be at night, because that wasn't a part of the concept. The concept that Felix and Paul had basically gotten agreement from them on, or it was basic. We never get to it. It was like we're gonna be in a car, we're gonna go into the city, we're gonna do this kind of stuff. So when I was reading through it, I was like, okay, this is great. And then I thought, the city at night to me is where the soul shows up. So if we're gonna really, have an intimate experience with it, it has to be there. And that's very close to my heart too, because ever since I was very young, I've written at night, and in fact the script that I'm working on right now, which is inspired by my time in Detroit, and the dreams that I had of Detroit after my time shooting this, I've been writing for 6 months entirely at night. Like I wake up at midnight and I write, and that's my morning through the night. So not a single word has been written in daylight so far. So for this experience, like what we had to do, which was challenging, was we had to come up with ideas before we had the interview, because we're going to go there and we're shoot the interview. And the production schedule and the extraordinary needs of VR to be able to shoot nocturnally, which VR cameras don't have the same sort of dynamic range as cinematic cameras do, and you see everything, so you can't just put up film lights and you're going to see it. So when I first proposed that idea, the studio, to their immense credit, were like, well, that is probably going to be quite a problem, but let's explore it. Let's see what it would look like. And then Drew Dawson, my cinematographer, who's shot my last film, Demon, which won the Austin Film Festival, he came on board, and we began developing a very graphic style to the city, which was, instead of trying to light things, to really embrace the darkness as part of eye tracking, because when you're in a VR experience where everything's bright, you just kind of like see everything. But in a dark experience, you can just, through naturalistic lighting, you can just find a way to make it more relaxing for the eye. So you land on these sort of gravity wells of light. But there was we had to do a lot of time to develop how we would go about lighting these things. A lot of conversation. It involved massive setups. Like the church is like a five image composite that was done on a remote dolly that had to be redone. So we had to set up massive lights up in this like falling apart balcony to light the ground, to motivate the window light, to motivate the moonlight, and then we had to move those, light the window from outside, and then like change other things to then, so we have a comp for that. But I'd seen VR before where like they'll just paint out lights and it looks so fake because you've got light and you're like, where's the light coming from? Doesn't look right. So there's an immense amount of detail that went into when we're removing lights to always make it feel motivated, and how, but it would blow your mind how much the lights you're seeing are actually not natural. Even like out on the streets and stuff. There's a lot of tricks. I put together a list of scenes from my imagination that I wanted to see in Detroit. We went through a review process with this team, because obviously you don't want to be showing a Detroit that he's completely disassociated with. It's like, what the fuck is this? Because I think there also has to be some crossover, with no one's going to have the same city as anyone, but it's like there needs to be a sense of relatability.
Yeah.
So his team responded well and was very supportive of the material we presented to them, gave some good thoughts, and contributed some good ideas. And so what you see a lot is a great deal of it is letting the performance spirit of the city come out, and also this theme of, I don't know if I want to say it, but I'll say that there's some Easter eggs throughout the piece in it that speak to the theme, the heart of it, I believe, and how I feel about Detroit.
How can people see this after after Sundance?
What I understand, it's going to be released online in a few weeks.
Cool.
There's been a really great response online so far. It seems like a good demand for it. Cool. And I'm stoked because I think that people who are fans, people who really follow his career, I think that they're going to get like more than they bargained for, in a good way.
Great.
I'm really excited to hear what the fans think. Yeah.
Congratulations, and pleasure meeting you. Thanks for your piece.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.